Hello, and welcome to the Crowley ISD PLC Curriculum Preview for the 5th 6 weeks for 5th grade ELAR. In this video, we will discuss the 5th 6 weeks assessment blueprint, address our hotspots for this unit, learn an adaptable vocabulary strategy, and view a real-time authentic literacy lesson. You will gain a deeper understanding of active reading to transfer responsibility of learning to the student. Unit 5A is Understanding Connections Across All Genres. The instructional dates are February 23rd through March 6th. The assessment posting date is March 3rd, and the assessment date is March 17th. Let's take a look at our hotspots for this unit from our Grade 5 heat map by standard. We see that 5.2b, Use Context Clues, is a hotspot, as well as our knowledge and skills statements dual-coded with Figure 19D. And finally, Figure 19F, Making Thematic Connections Across Genres, is also a hotspot. Let's take a closer look at Figure 19F on our IFD. Figure 19F standard reads, Make connections between and across multiple texts of various genres and provide textual evidence. These connections should include thematic links, author analysis, similarities and differences in the ideas presented in both texts, the details provided in both texts, and the author's purpose of both texts. 5.2b reads, Use context to determine or clarify the meaning of unfamiliar or multiple meaning words. Context in our standard is described as the words, sentences, or passages that precede or follow a specific word, sentence, or passage. One best practice we'll look at today is teach reading as thinking. Reading is a cognitive process, an active, constructive, creative, higher-order thinking activity that involves distinctive thinking strategies before, during, and after reading. Another best practice we'll look at today is giving students daily opportunities to talk about their reading. These two best practices are critical components of an authentic literacy lesson. Let's look at the 4 components of an authentic literacy lesson. They are read, annotate, discuss, and write. It is a best practice to have students read a text closely, annotate the text as they read, and provide opportunities for students to have rich discussion about the text and to write about the text. Let's see an authentic literacy lesson in action.
So after we do the small group brainstorm, I ask them to come prepared for Text Talk Time. And Text Talk Time is a discussion structure that I created in order to give the kids an opportunity to talk about a text that we had been reading during the week. It's an opportunity for them to call the shots and to discuss what they were thinking when they read the text. And it's also an opportunity for me to ask questions that challenge them and that I'll later expect them to respond to in writing. Before we get started, I want to go over the expectations like we do every single time. One person speaks at a time. And lately, remember, we've been kind of talking about how sometimes we get excited and we all start joining in and blurting out, and that's okay every once in a while. That happens in normal conversation. But we just remember that if I call for the zero noise signal, that we're all going to come back as a group and hear one person. Listen carefully to the speaker, right? You don't know if you're adding something if you're not listening to what someone else said, right? So you need to listen carefully. And use hand signals. So 2 fingers if you have something to add onto what somebody has already said, and thumbs up if you have something new to say. I use a strategy of hand signals in order to promote active listening. I also use hand signals to help me facilitate the conversation. Oh wow, lots of thinking. This strategy has been really effective because raising your hand wasn't enough. It gives students an opportunity to show me that they have something to say. Phineas, you have something new to say, looks like. Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Pose them to the group.
Okay, so the first one is, what happened to the ship after they left? The ship that was gonna come and they waited?
Can we go to that part? Do you know what page it said that on so we can?
I think. Well, we heard that in the beginning that.
For the first 20 minutes of the conversation, I'm just choosing students and trying to give turns to an equal number of students from different parts of the circle. I'm the facilitator in this discussion. Natalia, you have something to add?
It's also on Sacagawea. It was hard probably for her because she had her baby with her. And to go around that river and stuff, like babies, like we were talking about in our group, babies need a lot of good care. And it would be hard to go through all that, especially with a baby.
Do we have evidence that Sacagawea was with them when they crossed the falls? I know.
Yes.
I don't think she was with them the whole time. Devontae, do you see where there's evidence?
In the picture, it shows Sacagawea. She's pointing at the falls, and Lewis and Clark and a slave, they're like, Sacagawea is like pointing that they might die in the falls, so they probably have to go around it.
And since I know that this is a narrative nonfiction, and we've been learning about how in nonfiction the pictures and the captions, that gives us lots of information, we could probably be pretty sure that Sacagawea was with them and that this picture is placed here to give us that information. Next, I give them questions that I expect them to write about once we're done with Text Talk time. Let me pose these questions to you so we can get a little bit of talking about this before I send you out to write. I'm gonna take us back to viewpoint. It's not why the author wrote, but how the author feels about something. How does the author feel about Lewis and Clark? So will you take a minute and turn and talk to the person sitting next to you about what you're thinking about this question? What do you think how do you think the author feels about Lewis and Clark? After I pose a question to the group, I give the students an opportunity to turn and talk as a way to give them a few minutes to talk and think about possible answers before they feel like they need to share that with the whole group. Who thinks they found some evidence to back up what they think about how the author feels about Lewis and Clark? Let's go to Alyssa.
It says on page 644, from St. Louis, Lewis and Clark traveled to Washington, D.C., and almost every town they passed through, they brought bands to welcome them as heroes, which meant that like whenever they came in, everyone's like cheering and like congratulate them. And so like the author like put that in to make everyone feel that they're heroes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would say that the author feels like Lewis and Clark were heroes? The next question was, what is the author's viewpoint about exploring? And I provided them with the sentence frame to start their answer. The author thinks exploring is... If you were gonna fill in this sentence, how would you fill it in? The author thinks exploring is...
I think it's exciting because you could find out new stuff about different things you never knew about.
Okay, like here on 644, I noticed connecting with what you were saying, that it's exciting because you found things I'd never found before. Like on page 644, it says, the expedition returned with numerous samples of plant and animal life that had never been seen by American scientists.
Especially in those times, North America wasn't North America yet. It was called the New World. Yeah, so it was pretty interesting to them because they found new plants, new animals, new stuff they could use. And
on 641, I noticed that he said, I found a descriptor word, they emerged from the Rocky Mountains into the lovely valley of Clearwater River. If an author's using an opinion word like lovely, that's sort of showing how they feel about something. So I'm thinking that it's time to change gears. We need to get up and go back to our desks and start getting our minds ready for writing. In today's discussion, I posed the question about how the author feels about exploring, how the author feels about Lewis and Clark, with the expectation that the students were going to pull evidence from the text to support those statements. That's challenging work, and I knew that it would be pretty challenging for the students to work on individually in writing, so doing all that difficult thinking together in a group while they had support and they could hear other ideas is helpful for them, and I think it makes it easier for them to write about it individually later. A big part of the speaking and listening standard that I was focusing on has to do with coming prepared for the discussion. So I wanted to give my students ways to share their thinking, and one strategy I used was giving them a Post-it to record that thinking so that when it came time to actually discussing the text, they had evidence or remembered what it was that they were thinking when they read.
On page 639, I predicted that the Shoshone tribe will try to find Clark and the rest of the crew, and my prediction became true.
My favorite thing about the Post-its is that it honors their thinking and it helps them to remember what it is that stood out to them.
I said that the cross of discovery had.
I talked to the students about how sometimes we have this great thought and then we move on to the next thing and we already forgot what we were thinking. So a Post-it is a way of kind of holding on to that thinking, and we can even put it right in the book. What I like about the Post-it is that it helps them feel prepared for the discussion and that it gives them a record of something that they might be able to share with the whole group.
Ways for students to show active reading are the use of Post-its, dialectical journals, text coding, thinking notes, use or create their own graphic organizers, visualize the text by drawing pictures, making marginal notes or comments or annotations, asking questions about the text and noting their answers to their questions, writing a summary in their own words, or using movement strategies such as four corners, notes around the room, or statues, and of course, discussion. Next, let's review a vocabulary strategy called vocabulary paint chips. This is a familiar strategy for many and can be easily adapted for whatever vocabulary strategy you want to focus on.
There are lots of ways that teachers can approach teaching vocabulary.
I have new vocabulary cards because
In every unit, I will give them conceptual vocabulary words.
all right, so I'm going to send these around. Take one that you want.
And I've discovered that in order for students to really engage in the literacy around a concept, in order to write about it, talk about it, read about it, they have to have language about it. This particular strategy is taking paint chips and taking the vocabulary word and putting it on one shade of the paint color, and then putting different versions of the word and then finally synonyms of the word on that paint chip.
Okay, so those are coming around.
Every time they use that word or any of the words on that paint chip during class, they have a little sticker and they get to post it on the wall on their way out.
Lastly, I want to share a simple test-taking strategy that students can use when they are answering questions to paired passages. This strategy facilitates the need for students to go back into the text to provide the text evidence. If students use this strategy effectively, along with active reading strategies, we hope to see improvements in our Figure 19F standards as well as the others. Thank you, and I appreciate you participating in the PLC Curriculum Preview. Don't miss next 6 week's PLC Curriculum Preview video that will spotlight the gradual release of responsibility. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks again, and I appreciate your time. Until next time, goodbye.